We, we acknowledge the history of genocide and forced removal of the First Nations peoples experienced at the hands of white settlers and the continued harmful impacts of colonialism. We recognize that all the land here in what we call Malden is the traditional and ancestral home of the Pawtucket Band of Massachusetts tribe. Through learning about and sharing our history, we amplify the voices, we name the injustices, and we learn together and connect for a better future. We honor and respect the many diverse Indigenous people still connected to this land in our communities. First slide, please. The case for reparations: 250 years of slavery, 90 years of Jim Crow, 60 years of separate but equal, 35 years of racist housing policy. Until we reckon with our compounding moral debts, America will never be whole. Ta-Nehisi Coates, 2014. The case I make for reparations is virtually every institution with some degree of history in America, be it public, be it private, has a history of extracting wealth and resources out of the African-American community. Ta-Nehisi Coates, 2019. And Jennifer?
Thank you, Urga. I want to echo Urga's welcome. We're so glad to see you here tonight. This event is hosted by the Reparations Committee of the Mystic Valley Area Branch of the NAACP. The NAACP, or NAACP, is a multiracial advocacy organization founded in 1909. Among its founders were Ida B. Wells and W.E.B. Du Bois. Today, the NAACP consists of more than 2 million racial justice activists throughout the country. As for the Mystic Valley Area Branch of the NAACP, which is hosting this event, we were established some 50 years ago by a group of West Medford community leaders. Today, the branch serves 6 towns and cities: Medford, Malden, Everett, Woburn, Arlington, and Winchester. We have members in all 6 of these towns and cities, as well as a very active youth chapter. All of us working together to create and sustain racially just communities. If you're passionate about racial justice, we invite you to join us. We have a number of working committees, including an education committee, a political action committee, environmental justice committee, an economic development committee, and a reparations committee, which again is bringing you this workshop tonight. Please consider joining us. Okay, back to Urga.
This evening, slide please, we will learn how to use the Reparations Toolkit created by Corey and Jane Allen to make harm reports for our own cities or towns. This training will show you how to gather and analyze available data to document racial inequities in home ownership and denied loan applications. These skills will allow us to hold our elected officials informed and accountable to addressing and disrupting the perpetuation of systemic racism that continue to impact our BIPOC brothers and sisters today. Jennifer?
So before introducing our speakers, a bit of housekeeping. During the presentation, everyone except the speakers will be muted, but we will have time after the presentation for Q&A. At that time, we'll open the chat for you to put in your questions. So hold on to them or jot them down if they occur to you during the presentation. So now our speakers. Once again, I have the pleasure of introducing Jane and Corey Allen. Jane and Corey are residents of Melrose, where they are part of a group called Reparations for Melrose. I know them through their work as facilitators with white people challenging racism, moving from talk to action, a community education anti-racism workshop series. Jane is a public health professional, and Corey is a public media professional. Interestingly, they met 25 years ago in a graduate school course on data analysis. As we saw in our first Toolkit workshop in September, and as we are most likely to see again this evening, they're putting that training to very good use. They're committed to working within their spheres of influence to dismantle anti-Black systemic racism, and will show us how we can join them and do the same. So, Corey and Jane, take it away.
Thank you so much, Jennifer, and thank you, Urga. I'll share my screen. And so we're very excited to be with you here tonight and very grateful to the NAACP for having us to share our toolkit with you. And so to cue up the discussion tonight, I wanted first to start by talking a little bit about redlining. And so the main points that I want to make are that redlining is federal policy. It subsidized home ownership for white people. It excluded Black people from home ownership and from building generational wealth. And that it's not a thing of the past. It's something that very much is impacting people and communities today. There are lasting effects. So what is redlining? Starting in the 1930s, the Federal Homeowners Loan Corporation assessed 239 cities across the United States and assigned them color-coded grades to indicate the level of credit risk they represented. And you can see this map here. It's by mapping inequality. And later on, Corey will provide the link for you so that if you haven't been, you can go and look at your own community. So based on these grades, these assigned grades, bank loans were either approved or denied, and the level of risk was determined by race. So communities that were Black or were in racial transition were colored red, and that signified that they were hazardous. So you can see in the key on the lower left-hand side of the map. Communities that were white and were geographically separate from Black and changing communities were coded green or best. So we went to Mapping Inequality and downloaded this map of Melrose, which is the city where we live. And you can see that there are no redlined neighborhoods in Melrose. What this meant is that home loans would be approved only for white people. Black people were not eligible for government-backed mortgages in Melrose. So Melrose was white by design, and it remains predominantly white today. And that underscores a point that I have made and that I want to continue to make, is that redlining has lasting effects, has effects today. This is Pew Research Center data showing the wealth gap for Black and white families. And although redlining was outlawed in 1968 by the Fair Housing Act, we are still seeing the impact of redlining in the wealth gap. So redlining is the primary reason that we see this racial wealth gap today. And these data go from 1983 to 2019, but they are the most recent data available to us just yet. This report was from 2021. And they show that white families have 8 times the wealth of Black families. And the report also comments that, in fact, the wealth gap is increasing right now, as you can see, because white families are gaining wealth. So as I mentioned, there are lasting effects. And today we know that people in formerly redlined areas have higher rates of poverty, lower life expectancy, more limited education opportunities, less access to quality healthcare, greater exposure to pollutants, heat, and other effects of climate change, less access to broadband internet. Some colleagues of mine did a study looking at this, and there was a relationship between the redlining code that your community was given in the 30s and broadband internet today. And that exacerbated racial inequities during the pandemic because people in redline communities had less access to telehealth, for example, less access to attending school online, less access to working from home, things that kept us safe during the pandemic. And all of this is related to the built environment and the fact that the built environment was built segregated. And Black communities were divested of wealth, and that wealth flowed instead into the development of white communities. So I wanted to share with you this quote from Heather McGhee, and it's from her book, The Sum of Us, What Racism Costs Everyone and How We Can Prosper Together. And she points out that a race-conscious housing effort to close the Black-white gap in homeownership could be the centerpiece of a national effort for reparations for the economic harms of slavery, systemic discrimination, wealth suppression, and theft. And that is why we are interested in sharing this data with you. And Corey, I'll turn it over to you now.
Sure. Thank you, Jane. One thing we do in our analysis and in our report writing, and we would encourage everyone to do, is ask, what story does your city tell about itself? What do they tell about itself in the strategic planning documents they release, and speeches that are made, and reports they submit? So this is from the Melrose strategic vision from a couple of years ago. So the next slide. To Melrose's credit, they just released a housing production plan a few months ago. And I think this was the second city document I have seen that mentions that Melrose participated. It was redlined, tools like federal redlining. I also liked how they wrote this. Federal redlining steering by realtors and mortgage issuers. So it did show the network of federally backed government mortgages that were, issued by local banks and sold, enacted by local realtors. So it was a mix of state licensing boards, federal government, and local institutions. And then they say, Melrose demographics are partly a result of that system. So I will give credit to Melrose for redlining is beginning to be part of the story it tells about itself. And it's up to us to make sure that story is properly told. On the next slide, you may have seen this past Sunday, front page of the Globe from the Spotlight team. I think it was like 4 pages, a very long article about Brookline and the housing, the fight about housing in Brookline. And it went at length about the history of housing in Brookline. It did not mention the reporters did not mention that Brookline was redlined. I think the next slide we have from Mapping Inequality, that in the red circle, that was the only neighborhood where Black home buyers could buy a home in Brookline. They were not eligible for government-backed mortgages in any other part of Brookline. The Globe did mention some race restricted covenant language in the 1800s, but again, no mention of the practice of redlining. Nothing, as the Ta-Nehisi Coates quote about the moral reckoning of the federal housing segregation. That wasn't part of the story. I skimmed through Brookline's strategic vision document, their housing production plans. They're both still being written, but the most recent ones, neither of those seem to mention redlining either. So it was not a story Brookline was telling about itself in its official documents. On the next slide, you will see in the Boston Globe report, that Sunday story, a recent report from the Partnership for Financial Equity and the Chicago-based Woodstock Institute documented how very few Black home buyers there are in town, which is Brookline. Of the 575 buyers who got residential mortgages in Brookline in 2021, only 11 of them were Black. I'm here today that we can do exactly what the Woodstock Institute did. Like, we don't have to wait for the Woodstock Institute or a partnership to find this data. It is available to us. And when they cited that report, here's the report they cited. And you'll see very first thing in the data source for that report, Massachusetts Mortgage Lending Matters. Data from this analysis comes from one, mortgage lending data from the Home Mortgage Disclosure Act data set. So if we go to the next slide, oh, this is it for me for a while, but the point is we're going to learn how to analyze that data. It's available to us.
Thank you so much, Corey. So yeah, we just want to take a few moments to introduce you to the Reparations Toolkit. And as Jennifer mentioned, it was developed by a group called Reparations for Melrose, which is me and Corey and some others in our community. And we are working to end anti-Black systemic racism. And I just want to also acknowledge that we were inspired by teams working for reparations in Evanston, Illinois, and Amherst, Massachusetts. So the toolkit is a set of easy to follow instructions for documenting racial inequities in municipalities across Massachusetts. And we have worked in several areas so far. So we have toolkits in each of these areas that you see here. The first one we created was about exclusionary school discipline. We have one on teacher representation. So does the teaching staff reflect the student body, which is very important. We have looked at racial inequities in arrest rates, and now we're presenting to you the home loan toolkit. But each of these are available on our website with instructions for people to create their own harms report. And so Corey will share the link with you later so that you can go there. I'll just say, like, during this talk now, like, you don't need to write things down. You don't need to remember things. You don't need to do it right now, because this is just an introduction to familiarize you with it. And later on, you can go to the toolkit, and that will really be your support. And also, we're here and very welcome to talk with you anytime to support you too. So I'll just wanted to also talk about how this started for us. And so the way it started is we would see these articles on racial inequities in Boston in like the Boston Globe or other news outlets. And it sparked the thought for us, like, what did these data look like for our city? And so we read the articles, we looked at the data sources that the reporters were using to create and develop these stories. And we went to those same data sources so that we could understand our own city. And so that's what we did. And now this toolkit is allowing you to do the same, basically. So this study came out in 2023, and Corey calls it a good news, bad news story, because it shows that more Black and Latino home buyers, there were more Black and Latino home buyers in Greater Boston, but the racial home ownership gap remains stark. Corey will show you how to analyze these data for your own community. And then this report was from spring 2022. It showed that Black and Hispanic people are more likely to be denied mortgage loans in Boston. And Corey also has a report on this, and he will show you how to do this analysis as well. And I just want to say also, people don't want to think that this is their community. Like, Melrose is a great community. There's a lot that we are, doing right. Like, we try to be good people. We celebrate pride. We value kindness. Our motto is one community open to all. And so I think that sometimes that idea about what your city is and all the good things your city does prevents you from understanding the problems that you have and facing the problems that you have. And so what we see when people would say that's not us is that it really is us. So Corey's analysis on the home mortgage data show that in Melrose, Black homebuyers are 68% more likely to be denied a mortgage loan for a home relative to white homebuyers. And among homeowners, he found that Black homeowners are 176% more likely to be denied a home improvement loan, 147% more likely to be denied refinancing their mortgage, and 63% more likely to be denied cash out mortgage refinancing. So these data also, I'll just point out, you can see at the bottom of the slide, they are from 2007 and up through 2021. So this is happening now. And this is the situation in Melrose, and we're going to now jump into showing you how to get these same estimates for your own city. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Corey. And Corey, I'll also just invite you if you want to add to or amend anything I've said, please, like, feel free.
It is all good. Let's go to the toolkit. So
Okay.
And everyone can do it. I believe in every one of you and everyone who's watching. Just bear with me. It's not step by step. We'll get to it. We'll all be Woodstock level analysts. So if we go to the next slide, yes, every quarter financial institutions have to report all their mortgage application activities, and then it is uploaded to the Home Mortgage Disclosure Act website once a year. It is used we can use it. It's available for advocates like us to see if there are discriminatory lending patterns in our community. It's one of the other intentions is to give public officials information that help them make decisions and policies. I am not seeing it being used at that level like it should be. As I mentioned, the Globe did not use home mortgage data, Home Mortgage Disclosure Act data. Brookline didn't use it in their reports. I did credit the Melrose Housing Production Plan for its acknowledgement of redlining, but it did not use Home Mortgage Disclosure Act data in its housing production plan. It really should have included that in its housing production plan. One thing we can see from this is, does the composition of your home buying population match the composition of your city's population? Does it match, your city overall? And then, yes, as Jay mentioned, this was one of the articles. What is really great about news stories is that we can localize it. You read it in the Globe about Boston and we can localize it to our own community. And that kind of sets up a lot of the decision rules, a lot of the reporting that we can just model as we make it for Melrose specifically. So the next slide is, we'll start the step-by-step instructions, how to get the data. So I have the link here. You go to this website. The link is available on the toolkit. You'll see a couple of options. You'll want to click on the big button that says select summarize download. So click on that. It will take you to this screen, and you will see there are 5 years of data. You say data year, it defaults to 2022, but you can go back to 2018 from this web page. So under step 1, we want to click on the down arrow under select geography, and we want to select county. So you click on county, and then on the next slide, you're just going to type in Middlesex, and make sure you select Middlesex, Massachusetts. So locate Middlesex, Massachusetts on the drop down, click on it. Then the next slide is step 3, select a filter, and we want to filter by loan purpose. So you'll see that on the drop down, you select loan purpose, and then on the next slide, it will show you the different types of loan purposes. And we want to check home purchase. I want to see all the loans that were all the applications for people who wanted to buy a home, who wanted the mortgage to buy a home. So just do home purchase. These are going to be big data sets. So just click home purchase and then click on that download data set. And it's going to download a CSV file to your computer. So on the next slide, I am going through a couple of quick steps, just assuming you're going to use a Google account. The reason I'm using a Google account is they're free and they have Google Sheets, which is like Excel. And if you're working in a group, it's easy to share the sheets with others, online. So go to your Google account, click on that grid in the top right corner. You'll get a drop down of all the options. You'll want to select Drive, and then you'll want to click on that plus new button. So you click on that, and this is where it's going to give you the option. And you're going to want to, on the next slide, it'll say file upload is one of the options. You want to click on file upload, and that is where you'll find the CSV file that was downloaded to your computer. So you're going to upload that CSV file into your Google account. And once it is uploaded, you're going to want to like right click on it and tell it, okay, please open this file with Google Sheets, so open with Google Sheets. And then it'll beach ball for a second. It's a big file, but then you'll see it'll look like this. It'll look like, it's display as this spreadsheet where you'll see a lot of columns with lots of different variables. And so this is what it's going to look like when you've opened the file. And then I do have a gift for everyone. I have done this work for Middlesex, Massachusetts for 2018 through 2022. I will put the shared folder in the chat when I'm over, but you can ignore everything I just told you and just click on those links and share them, copy them. They're read only, so you can make a copy in Google or however you copy things. But anyways, I have done some of that data gathering for you. But if you don't, that's how you do it. Next year when it's not in a shared folder, that's how you'll go back and get it. So we now have this is just how it would look in the shared folder I share. So this is the 5 years of home purchase data for Middlesex. So on the next slide, step-by-steps on how to analyze the data. So the two columns we care about for this analysis are column K, which is derived race. And that is, again, the variable that the Home Mortgage Disclosure Act database creates, to identify the applicant or co-applicant race. And then the other column N, is action taken. What action was taken on this application? So if we go to the next slide, I have provided the link to the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau. This is the documentation notebook on all the definitions of the Home Mortgage Disclosure Act database. So I just screen grabbed this. This is what they mean. These are all the categories for derived race. And again, this notebook is very useful to look up a lot of different variables in the set. So, and I should mention on the next slide, this past summer, we were applying for a home equity line of credit, and I was going through online, and the application matched exactly that Home Mortgage Disclosure Act notebook. They just borrowed they use the same questions, obviously. So I was just like, oh, I've seen all this before when I was doing my racial harms reports. So this is how they gather it. This is how they collect it, the financial institution. So getting back to step by step, I mentioned we care about derived race and action taken. So there are really two positive actions we care about. So action value 1 means the loan was originated. You got your loan to buy a house. Number 6 is also good news. That means you got your loan, but the financial institution sold your loan to someone else, another institution, before the quarter ended. So you got a house. It's just you're paying your mortgage to someone different than who issued your original mortgage. So 1 and 6 are your loan was approved. You were able to buy your house. So the next slide, we want to go to that data set I showed you that opened up, with all the data. And I always click on that top left button in the very corner above row 1 and to the left of column A, because when you click on that, you highlight the whole sheet. So that just means you've got everything, all the data is captured. Then you're going to want to go up to the menu where it says insert and go down and select pivot table. So you click on pivot table. Then on the next slide, you'll see like a dialog box pops up and it says, where do you want this pivot table? And you're going to want to say, just make me a new sheet for my pivot table. And then you're going to click create. So select new sheet and then click create. It's going to open a new sheet in that Google Sheet, a new tab, and this is how it's going to look. It's going to be an empty pivot table ready for you. On the right, you see the pivot table editor. It's ready for you to add rows and columns to make a table, and then just select the value to populate the table. So it's probably going to give you suggested. Just ignore the suggested. We're going to add our own rows and columns and values. So next step, we'll start with rows. So you click on where it says add next to rows, click on rows, add, and then you'll see all the variables pop up as options to be added as rows. So this is where you're going to want to select action taken. I want my rows to be one of those 7 actions that could happen to an application. So select action taken. And again, there are 8 results, but I just want to see all 8 results, lined up, a row for each result. So I've shown this here. The action taken rows are ready, and you see a row for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I've put red squares around 1 and 6 because those mean the applicant got the mortgage, So my rows are ready. Now I need to add columns. So I click on columns. I go to columns and click add. Again, all the options pop up. What I want to see in my columns are derived race. I want to see the race of applicants and co-applicants. So click on select derived race. And then there we go. It puts it as columns, all the different options that in the derived race field. So I am ready. Now I just need to add my values to the table. So go to values and select add. And then the options will again pop up, all the different variables. I'm choosing loan purpose because every single row in this data set is for the same loan purpose, which is home purchase. I want a value that's the same for the entire spreadsheet for every single row, so I could have done activity year, I could have done state code, I could have done county code. Was that, Jane, is that a question or?
No, I just made a mistake and flipped forward.
Oh, no. So anyways, just select loan purpose, and then you will now see it's going to give you, how do you want me to calculate these values? Do you want me to add them up? Do you want me to? So that little down caret next to sum, click on that, summarize by, instead of sum, if you click on the little down, it's going to say, I'm going to say use count A, which is just the same thing as counting everything, but it counts text as if it were a number, so I'm just saying, just tell me the count here. I'm not doing fancy math. We're going to do math from the table, but here, just show me the numbers, just show me the totals by each option. So count A is what we want. And then now we see the number of loans by what happened, action taken, and by the race of the applicants. So next slide. As I said, if you can get to this table, you've done it. You are now equal to Woodstock Institute in your ability to begin storytelling. You have processed the data. Now we just have to know where to look to storytell. Again, right now I care about 1 and 6. In a couple of minutes, we'll talk about action taken number 3, which is application denied. So again, if you get here, you can tell who got the loans and who got denied. This tells us everything about Middlesex County in 2022 in terms of home buying by race. So on the next slide, we look at that grand total at the bottom. There's a grand total column and row. We see the number 28,264. That means there were 28,264 home loan purchase applications in Middlesex, Massachusetts in 2022. That's how many were reported. So if we look at the next slide, we care about, again, column 1 and row 1, the row that says 1 and the row that says 6. So action taken 1, action taken 6. we see that there were 17,662 loans that were originated and 4,549 loans that were originated and then purchased by someone else, but purchased by another financial institution. So we add those two together. This means that there were 22,211 applications that resulted in someone getting their mortgage to buy their home. The next slide, we just, we can then look at column F where it says Black or African American. So that shows the totals by Black applicants. And in row 1, we see 512. And I'm sorry, the row that says 1, action taken 1, we see 512. The row that shows 6, we see 22. So again, we add 512 and 22, and we get on the next slide, I think, so yeah, we now know there were 22,211 home purchase mortgages originated in Middlesex in 2022. And we know that 534 were for Black home buyers. This means that Black home buyers accounted for 2.4% of home buyers in Middlesex in 2022. I just divide that 534 from the Black applicant total by the grand total of all the loans that were originated, or 1 or 6. So I'm just totaling up that and just dividing 534 by 22,211. So that's where I get 2.4. That's how I get that number. It's all right there on the table. So how does that compare? Let's compare that to the county census data. So really, my advice is Google it. Just put in what percent of Middlesex, Massachusetts are Black residents, or what's the population. That's Google. Will put the table right there in the search result. A lot of times it'll show 6.2% of Middlesex, Massachusetts residents are Black, or that's the population composition. So I've also pointed out that one of the top search results will probably be from census.gov. So if you click on that, you will see the full table. And again, I've highlighted where it says Black or African American alone percent, 6.2%. So Black residents comprise 6.2% of the Middlesex population. So again, in terms of storytelling, Black people accounted for 6.2% of the Middlesex population, but only 2.4% of the county's home buying population. So again, if it were reflecting the population, the home buying percent should be 6%, not 2%. So Black people are underrepresented as home buyers compared to their composition of the population of Middlesex County. And then the next, as I mentioned, if you get to that table, you can see who got mortgages and who got denied. So let's look at the applications that were denied in Middlesex. And again, BUR set us down how to talk about this data and these outcomes in this story. And there they found, the likelihood of denial for Black and Hispanic applicants in Boston. So as I mentioned, we get to that, show me rows by action taken, show me columns by derived race, and this give me the values of all the loan purpose. So again, here we care about 3. Your application was denied. You did not get a mortgage to buy your home. So on the next slide, we will look at that row where number 3 is. And as we see it, the grand total at the end in Middlesex, Massachusetts in 2022, 1,357 applications were denied. We know that there were, at the very grand total at the row and column, we know that there were 28,264 total applications. So 1,357 divided by 28,264, 5% of applications in Middlesex in 2022 were denied. Now we look at the action taken 3 for Black or African American applicants, and we see 102. And we see that there were 787 total loan applications for Black applicants. So of the 787 applications from Black home buyers, 102 were denied. So divide that 102 by the 787 total applications, we get 12.9%. So 12.9% of applications from Black home buyers were denied. So 5% for the county overall, 12%, 12.9% for Black home buyers. So already well above the county average. But here we can also compare the denial rate for Black home buyers against that of white applicants. So we see that there were grand total for white applicants, 13,076 applications from white home buyers. Of those 645, just looking at that row with the 3, 645 were denied. So divide 645 by 13,076, 4.9% of all applications from white home buyers were denied. So now we just want to index that percent of Black applicants who were denied against the percent of white applicants who were denied. So that's 12.9% divided by 4.9%. And then to make an index, we multiply that by 100. It gives us 263. And just in interpreting an index of 100 would be even odds. It would mean Black applicants were no more or less likely than white applicants to be denied a home purchase application. But to find out to find our likelihood, we subtract 100 from our total. So 263 minus 100 is 163. This means in 2022 in Middlesex, Black home buyers were 163% more likely to have their home purchase loan application denied than white applicants. So that's the disparity. That's the story for 2022. 163% more likely for Black applicants to have been denied. Then I have added, these are the same steps you would use on the next slide. You would go back to click on home improvement and download home improvement. Or on the next slide, oh, and I did provide the home improvement for Middlesex. So here's the link. I'll put those folders in the chat. Next slide, same thing for refinancing. These are people refinancing their mortgage. So next slide, you will see the shared folder with those 5 years of data. So this is the story for Middlesex, but we care about our cities. Okay, so the final steps I need to show are how to filter the data for your city, and it requires a pen and paper. When you're doing it, you need to determine the state code, the county code, and the census tract codes for your city. The census tract, this code is an 11-digit number. It combines the 2-digit state code, the 3-digit county code, and the 6-digit tract code. I provided a link of how you can find this information out. I'm hoping someone will show me a Wikipedia page or something that has an index of all your cities and all your census tract codes, but I've never found it. I asked ChatGPT, it said can't be done. I asked Google Bard and they gave me a lot of garbage and some that were right. But anyways, next slide, we will, so if you go to that website that I linked to, and I just recommend, finding the address of your city hall, or some address in your city, put that in the search bar, select search. It's going to give you a map, and on that map, it will show you your census tract codes, where they're located. I have put little red boxes around them, and it's just the final part of that 11-digit code. If you look, if you want to go back just real quick,
Sure.
On the same web page, you'll see that little table of data, and just we're going to magnify that table of data because it's there to see it. But if the next slide, I'm just going to unpack it some for you, because that's where you see it provides your state code, your county code, and your tract code. And the track code in the data, there's no decimal place, it goes out. It just shows up as a whole number in the data set. But what you really care about are that 3-3. Well, for Melrose, you'll see most every tract starts with 336. Then it's a question of if it's a 4, a 1, or a 2, or a 3. But anyways, write down however many census tracts your city has. And then what we're going to want to do is you go back to the data set, that you opened up that has all the Middlesex data. And on the menu bar, you're going to select data. It's going to give you a drop down, and you're going to want to select create a filter. So you select create a filter, and then the next slide, you'll see suddenly every column has a little caret next to it, a little drop arrow, it's like, well, what do you want to filter on? Well, I'm like, okay, thanks. I want to filter on census tract. That's what I'm trying to isolate here. So you click the little down arrow on the left corner of the census tract column, and you'll see this box appear. So the next slide, it's already checked all the data in the census tract code, but we want to go to filter by values, and we want to clear. We want to get rid of those check marks because I only want to check the stuff I care about. So select clear, and then now you're going to want to type in your census tract code. Hopefully your city will have a lot of common numbers like 336. Anyways, the point is, once I got to 336, everything after that was a Melrose census tract. So I could click on all of those. I had an arrow by those specific ones. I only selected those that have a check mark by them, make sure they're checked, and then click OK. And then you're going to just want to copy this spreadsheet because it's filtered to your census codes. Copy the spreadsheet, paste it into a new spreadsheet, and then name it something. So if you go to the next slide, I think I'd renamed mine, 20. I put a new sheet, called it 2022 census tract data, Melrose census tract data. I pasted it in. Now I just have to double check I did it right. So if we go to the next slide, again, that insert and then select pivot table. And then on the next slide, it's going to say, what do you want? I'm like, yes, make me a new sheet, create me a new sheet. It's going to open up a new tab. And then I'm going to go to pivot table editor. I'm going to say, I'm going to go to rows, add. It's going to give me all the options in the data set. Next slide, you'll see it'll pop up. And I'm just going to show me census tract. Let me see if I did this right. So I select census tract, and then it populates. And that's how I know I have copied over only the Melrose census tract data. I didn't get anyone else in there by mistake. So I'm ready to analyze and storytell about Melrose specifically. And that's what you can do when you go to the map and write down your census tract codes, just filter them. Filter on just the ones you want. So just make sure just the ones you want. Get rid of the check marks, search the values you care about, and then check as those search results appear. So, and again, as Jane mentioned, we're not going anywhere. This is a racial justice multiplier. The more people doing this kind of work and knowing about their city, the stronger we all have to understand what's going on and to make cases for reparations for racially segregated housing policies, which has profoundly shaped so many of our cities, in Massachusetts and throughout the country. I think.
Thanks, Corey. Yeah, that's the last slide of the toolkit, and I know it's a lot, but we have a walkthrough on our website, and it's like split into it's kind of two toolkits that Corey presented tonight. So like seems like a lot probably right now, but if you go to our website, you will find tools to walk you through it. And as Corey said, we're here. So I know it's getting a little late and we want to have time for discussion, but I think we just wanted to share a couple more slides. If Urga and Jennifer, if that's okay. Okay, I get the thumbs up from Urga. So we just wanted to say, like, to give you some tips about beyond analyzing the data. So analyzing the data is critical for you to understand, as Corey said, the story that you're seeing about racial inequity in your city. But then we want to make sure that you do something with it. So, well, first bit of advice is to gather a team to do this work with you, because we have a small team, but everyone has different gifts and experience that they bring to the work. And it has just made it really possible for us to do this work. So I just urge you to find a team. And then once you have analyzed the data, we want you to share your findings. And so we have shared these findings with the public and also with elected officials. And we want you to ask city officials like what plans they have to address these inequities. And we want you to connect with us, and we want to build a community of people across municipalities, in municipalities all across Massachusetts, who are doing this work so we can support each other. So please do connect with us. And then I just wanted to show you, like, this is an example of like us writing to the newspaper about what we found. Corey wrote these letters and highlighting the results of the work that he did. And we also had an election a couple of weeks ago, maybe last week. Time's a little strange right now, but and we had a racial justice forum, and we invited all, this is an image of the mayoral forum. So we invited all the mayoral candidates, and they came and we asked them questions based on the data analysis we did. So in this question, we asked them about zoning for single family homes. And then this is a question we asked about, based directly on the Home Mortgage Disclosure Act data about Black home buyers being 68% more likely than white home buyers to have their mortgage application denied. So we asked our elected officials this, and we had like 100 people at this event, and hundreds more have watched it online, I believe. Is that right, Corey?
Yeah,
So-
absolutely. Yeah. And the first one was someone from our team who was basically, had the question, look, the housing production plan essentially reinforced the homeowner loan corporation zones from the 30s. Like, why are we continuing to keep this? Like, oh no, we can't have higher density. Like, you're still protecting what was racially segregated, and so it just helped to say to a city leader, to people running for mayor, hey, we are continuing harms that have not been justice has not been done on these harms. And then the second is,
Great point.
now you've seen this data. We have looked at, because the housing production plans, racial equity was a goal, which is laudable, but it's like, it's now just, it's much worse than, now that we've looked at the data and now we actually use the data available to advocates and policymakers, we know the extent of the problem much more specifically than if you're just looking at, census data or something a foundation did one time and is not committed to doing every year.
Great. And so I think I'll just wrap up. Again, we just want to remind you to think about what story your city tells about itself, and just know that until your city or town talks about redlining, they're probably not going to really face or be prepared to work for reparations. So we think that's an important part of where we need to get them to. And then this is the link for the reparationsformelrose.org, which is where the toolkit is. Corey will also put it in the chat. And we would love to connect with you. This is our email address. We can also put this in the chat. And finally, just a thank you to the Mystic Valley area branch of the NAACP for inviting us. We are super grateful to have had this opportunity to share this with you. And we have some time for questions and discussion. I'm sorry it's not quite as much as maybe we intended, but we welcome your questions and to hear your thoughts.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks. Oh, and Corey, thank you for putting all those links in the chat.
Yeah,
Wow, look how
the-
organized you
the
are. You have
shared
them all.
the shared folders are there. Then I added the toolkits, and the toolkit, depending on how you like to learn, it's either available as a PDF, like these slides as a PDF, or a video walkthrough like we just did. So so hopefully one of those will be helpful.
Folks, feel free to unmute yourselves if you have any questions. That was a wonderful presentation.
You, Erica.
Oh, I see a hand raised from Christina.
Hi, thank you for that presentation. I think it was really helpful. I had a question about the looking at the disparity of loan approval, and I guess I don't know much about loan approvals, but I'm under the I think that aren't they done sort of at a national level? So I'm trying to understand how that factors into the disparity you might see when you collect that data and you see it for your town. But it seems like that some of that decision is sort of coming down from beyond the towns. And also the racial and ethnic identifier, is that a volunteered data? Because it looked like some people just chose not to enter that. So
Right.
is it the applicant that volunteers the information, or do like loan officers fill that in?
Right. That's a great question. To the second question, you're obviously allowed to not provide, but it is something the loan officer fills in. So I can't promise if you're applying online and you don't provide it, and the loan officer fills in the report. Whether they're just passing through the application or they do it themselves, I'm not positive, but it is submitted. A lot of times this is the judgment of the loan officer, in terms of the race or ethnicity. And there is ethnicity is provided as well. It's just a separate category from race, as opposed to, is it Cambridge Savings Bank or Bank of America making the decision? Like, that's a great question. And again, I'm not sure who makes the final call, but for us, it's just that, there is still that our home buying where Melrose was shaped by systemic housing segregation, and the home buying rate we're seeing is not going to begin to correct for that. It's lower than our population. So just as a policy measure, there needs to be some sort of intervention to realize we're going to be less diverse in terms of our homeowners.
David has his hand raised. Go ahead, David. Oh, you're muted though, David.
Unmute. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Corey, for that presentation, and Jane for your work. So what are we going to do about it? You've showed us how to find the data, how to prove what we already knew, which was that racial discrimination and institutional racism has created this problem. And where I feel, as a reparations group that I'm a part of, and many of you are a part of, we get to that point where we identify the problem. We may even, as you've done, flesh out the data that proves that there's a problem. What you showed us doesn't explain necessarily that all, why these loans were denied. You could say it was just on the basis of race, but I'm sure the loan officers would have other explanations for it. And the question is, what can reparations organizations do to change this situation? What have they done in Evanston? What have they done in Amherst? What approach are they taking to actually make a difference?
Well, I'll start, Corey, and then I'll just invite you also to jump in. But I mean, my sphere of influence is as a resident of Melrose, and I don't control what the banks do, but what I can do is bring these data to the attention of the public and my elected officials and people in my community, because I know you're saying that we know this already, and I think those of us on this call probably have a sense of these inequities being in place, but I don't think that our community and our electeds necessarily do know this information, and they certainly don't know with specificity like we're bringing it to them. And then we showed you, we can publish letters, we can ask our electeds like about these issues. And so I just think bringing it to people's attention is really valuable. And so that I think is the first step. But Corey, you might have some other or different
Well,
thoughts.
No, and I think one thing I didn't know, in my mind, the home ownership was the end goal. Like we just need to, and what we have seen in the data are Black homeowners are more likely to be denied, refinancing and home improvement. And this is up until the pandemic, anyone who bought a house in Melrose had a lot of equity built over those years. I mean, a burned out house was on sale for $600,000, so I mean, that I didn't know, and that shocks me even more, because that the disparity continues even into home ownership. And Jane, I think you had a story about appraisals, that
Yeah, I mean, we've probably seen, like, now there've been like 3 occasions in which like that it's been made very public that Black people have received a really low home appraisal, and only to take out of their home any evidence of their race and have a white friend stand in for the next appraisal and watch that appraisal double or go up dramatically. And heartbreakingly, this one woman who did a story with NPR said, like, I realized that the thing that was devaluing my home was me. And so, I mean, we've started to see those stories in the last couple of years, but I do think, like Corey says, like, a lot of it is not broadly known. Anyway, I'm not really sure if this answers your question, but I do find value in sharing this data with people.
I agree. I do believe that it's important because folks don't know what they don't know. And once it's been brought to their attention, then they can continue to learn more and spread the word and amplify what it is that's going on behind closed doors. So awareness is everything. So the work that you, Jane and Corey, are doing is just really invaluable on so many levels. And we need to connect and continue this work together, because oh, how loud we will be saying the same things together.
Yeah.
And really holding our elected officials accountable for addressing these wrongs.
I think also, I just want to echo that in answer to the question that was posed. We can't begin to repair if we don't know the extent of the damage. And so I think that's what's really valuable about these toolkits, is they allow us to explore the damage in a number of different sectors, and to bring that out, bring it to the attention of our elected officials and to the public, so that we can enter a discussion about what to do about it and how to repair.
Thank you, Jennifer. And thank you, Urga. I really appreciate what you both said.
And I can say from as a member of the Association of Black Citizens of Lexington, I know that there's been discussion about the decline of the Black population, specifically in the town of Lexington, in recent years. And besides there being amongst the Black citizenry a sentiment about why that might be, I think this having data to support a narrative or to maybe amplify or enhance a conversation around that, I think would go a long way, along with a toolkit that would provide best practices and tips for creating a narrative around that conversation, I think is something that I'm looking forward to sharing among the groups that I'm a part of. Vision for Lexington being one of them. I see the chair of Vision for Lexington on my on the call here. So I do appreciate this.
Thank you so much,
this opportunity.
Daniel.
Thank you. That's fantastic.
Yeah, thank you.
Any more questions or comments? We're at 8:05.
I just wanted to ask Jane and Corey whether you had an impact with that meeting with the mayoral candidates. I mean, what kind of feedback you got?
Go ahead, Corey.
Yeah, no, yes, the short answer, I thought it was very positive. First of all, one problem Jane and I are always trying to solve for is the "no one has mentioned this to me" response from a candidate. So first, they know about it, and second, they were sent the questions in advance and the data, and there were some very thoughtful answers. There are some, there are first-time home buyer programs that can help marginalized communities, and so they spoke to those. They understand it's a priority. I know we're all fighting over limited resources. They know we did those with 2 other anti-racism groups, and they know, okay, these are people who are bringing 100 people to a forum, and I have to take these matters seriously, and that they're watching, they're looking at the data, and they're asking for accountability. So I see Robin.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment. Thank you very much. This has been so informative. It occurs to me that when you look at the number of people that have applied for a loan in Melrose, that presumably a number of those people are not from Melrose and are trying to get into Melrose. So it brings up the issue of people who are trying, especially, Black people who are trying to get into a suburban community by looking for a loan and getting denied is part of the picture, because we're trying to increase diversity in our towns. It would be interesting to know, where these people are applying from. Clearly someone who's looking for a finance or a upgrade of their home, or is already living in Melrose, but the rest of them, we don't really know. So I just wanted to point that out, because that's I think that's a really interesting, a really important piece of movement of, allowing people to move into our communities.
Yep, absolutely. And again, everyone can look through the data sets. They do provide reasons for denial. I didn't get into them, and there's a couple of coding, like 1111 means not applicable. Things you look in that code book, it'll tell you. But in Melrose, I do know Black applicants were given more reasons that they were denied than white applicants, so even that had a disparity, but so it's a rich data set. It's just, I'm just, taking it step by step, and our main goal in Reparations for Melrose is just to make systemic racism visible in our community. That's one of the primary goals, and so people know and see it, and it's a frame of reference. And we're not advocating for a specific policy at the moment. It is really, our goal is to make systemic racism visible in the many ways it shapes the community, but seems invisible, to make it visible.
Thank you so very much, everyone, for joining us this evening. This was just absolutely invaluable. We will like for you all to fill out a survey for us. We'll be sharing it in the link, and we'll put in a link in the chat. We'll also be emailing it out to folks. Please stay connected and consider joining our Mystic Valley area branch of the NAACP. Only together will we be able to make change in our communities, and let us not let the city line stop us from uniting. Thank you again, Jane and Corey, and thank you all for being with us this evening. Take care.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.